What does Five Nights at Freddy's Help Wanted hide from the player behind the scenes? Today, I'm going to be breaking open every single minigame and area in Help Wanted to show you how this game works from a game developer's point of view. We'll be finding hidden things out of bounds, cut content, leftover developer assets, and showing off tons of goofy things that can occur if you break the game. So without further ado, let's jump right into the intro for the game and the FNAF 1 area. Now, real quick, let's do a short recap of everything that happens in this portion of the game. That way, we're all refreshed on it. So first, we arrive at the title screen, which appears to take place in a FNAF 1 inspired pizzeria. And after starting a new game, we'll be treated to an introductory roller coaster ride. After going through a set of doors, we'll pass by a handful of billboards detailing some of the franchise's history before being presented with a waiver. After accepting and passing through another door, we arrive at the game's main hub, which appears to be located within a Freddy Fazbear's pizzeria. Now, as for the FNAF 1 minigame itself, it's a mostly faithful recreation of the original, but in a 3D space. You must observe the cameras in order to keep tabs on the approaching animatronics, and close your doors in order to prevent them from reaching you. You also have to manage your power usage to avoid running out before the night ends at 6 a.m., with this challenge becoming more difficult as each night passes. On night 5, the game takes on a grayscale appearance, and the lights indoors will begin glitching out at random intervals. The jump scares in this level are also different, as they'll now showcase the hard mode variants of the cast instead of the standard animatronics. That's it for the recap though, so let's head back in time and take a look at the intro sequence. So first and foremost, we can take a look at this intro cutscene from a different angle. And it's actually a lot smaller than you'd think. The cart we ride in is placed upon a length of track, and there is a one-sided piece of geometry placed directly behind us. This object is used to create the illusion that the track sort of fades out of existence, when in reality, it extends quite a ways behind us. We just can't usually see it. We can also take a look at our sweet ride from a different angle, and it's actually pretty cool looking. The cart itself is brown, and the front is modeled to resemble Freddy Fazbear himself. All is missing is the iconic top hat. Now as we glide along this track, these billboards usually light up as we pass by them. And with the lighting effects turned off, you can see each of them already loaded in. They're visible before we even reach that room. When passing through the doorway at the end of the track, it's typically pitch black, and we cannot see anything beyond the door itself. But since the post-processing effects are currently disabled, you can see there is a white sphere just kind of floating at the very end. The outside of the room itself is covered in a default texture, and you can see also that the track extends a short ways beyond that back wall. As the player reaches the white sphere, the cart will immediately stop as the cutscene ends and we arrive at the hub. Arriving at the main hub area, we can take a closer look at this map's design, where we'll find that the doors in this location don't lead anywhere. The hallways surrounding the player do not lead anywhere either, and just out of sight, they simply lead into the void. Heading over to the prize counter, we can spend Faz tokens to obtain various toys and collectibles. And moving the camera beyond that back wall, we'll see that the crane is currently suspended here until the player makes a selection. There's also a white cube stored back here as well, but I'm not entirely sure of its purpose. When we select a prize, the crane will slide out through the door and drop it on the counter in front of us, where it will then exit through another door on the right-hand side. After leaving the player's sight, it will just then teleport back to its original location until it's activated once more. Something kind of interesting though is that the crane and door are not synced properly, so they will clip through each other at the end of this animation. Now if we head out of bounds to the right of the stage, there are a couple of objects a little ways out that are pretty interesting. There's a disc-shaped flashing light out here, as well as a button that says End Showtime. Now at first I was confused as to why this was out here, but the reason is actually pretty cool. So to my understanding, there was originally supposed to be a show that could be unlocked later in the game, where the original cast would sing and perform on stage in front of us. This was later scrapped, but apparently this performance remains within the game's files. This Showtime button is currently deactivated, but we can force the performance to begin before the prerequisites are completed, although it doesn't work the way I had hoped. The moment we activate Showtime, the player will be teleported to a separate area within the same map. This section of the level has Pirate's Cove, the main stage, and some standard map assets, but nothing else. The performance itself will not begin, considering we've broken the game's logic. But taking a peek behind the curtains reveals each of the cast just T-posing in their usual spots. Over in Pirate's Cove, we can see Foxy T-posing as well. Now off to the side, we can see a large piece of gray geometry placed out of bounds, and this is used to obscure the player's view of the rest of the map. Flying beyond it, we can see that the rest of the level is still loaded in, except the stage and Pirate's Cove are currently missing. While I was over here though, the missing assets were restored and the Showtime area that we teleported to had unloaded. I'm assuming this is because even though the show never started, enough time had passed for the performance to end. resulting in the player being warped back to the main hub. Before moving on from the showtime area, I activated the black light switch in the hub before coming over here, which resulted in something pretty cool. Since the black light mode is currently enabled, each of the performing characters have been reskinned with these neon color palettes. To my understanding, these reskins are a reference to the black light merchandise that was originally produced by Funko in 2018. These guys are usually a bit rugged in appearance, so seeing them with these bright colors is a bit strange. Now heading into night 1, we can turn the lights on and get a better idea of how this map actually functions. First off, the darkness that surrounds the player's office is more than just basic lighting effects. On either side of the player, there are black barriers placed in the doorways that obscure our view of the halls. When you activate the lights, these barriers are unloaded, which allows us to see beyond the door. And speaking of these barriers, they're used elsewhere in this map as well. One of them is used to block both ends of the hallways, and the other is placed in front of the restroom's entrance. If we head over to Pirate's Cove, there's a sign out front that reads, "Sorry, out of order." This very same sign can be found in the hub as well, only it's hidden just beneath the floor in front of the show stage. So now let's take a look at the animatronics themselves, because the way they navigate this map is pretty interesting. Unlike the first FNAF game, which is made of pre-rendered images where the animatronics simply warp between locations, we can actually watch these guys as they move throughout the pizzeria. The cameras will be blocked by static at the beginning and end of these walking cycles, but when viewing this from a different perspective, we can see how they snap into their idle positions. It's super cool watching these creepy animatronics walking through the pizzeria, and it's especially unsettling when they stop and turn to the player in the doorway. Foxy isn't much different than the others, as he will also snap between the stages of his approach. And when he begins running, he will be moved to the end of the hallway before sprinting to our office. If our office door is closed when he reaches it, he will immediately unload. Although he is not physically present, we can hear him attacking the door, and opening it before this interaction finishes will result in us getting jump scared. On the topic of our animatronic foes, something I was curious about is what happens to them when they're not visible on any cameras. There are circumstances where the animatronics cannot be found anywhere within the map, and by moving the camera out of bounds when this occurs, we'll see that they are stored way off to the side. What's interesting though, is that Freddy does not behave the same as the others. Instead of being placed where the others are, Freddy is moved way beneath the map itself. And speaking of Freddy, as he makes his way towards the player, there are a few locations he can appear in, including a couple where we can only see his eyes glowing in the dark. Turning the lights on, we're able to observe him in all his glory. And that's not always a good thing, because when he's staring at the camera from the restrooms, he's actually clipping through the ground. Freddy is leaning around the corner of the women's restroom, and upon closer inspection, his feet are sticking down beneath the floor. This is not as spooky as you think it is, Freddy. Now, while filming, I got jump scared by one of the animatronics, but when I moved the camera over to the office, there was nothing there. As it turns out, the jump scares in this level actually take place pretty far from the map itself. Way up above the pizzeria, we will find a large gray sphere. And this sphere is where the jump scare animations take place. So there are a couple of ways you can get jump scared in this location, including leaving the door open when they're standing in the doorway, failing to close the door when Foxy charges your office, and leaving the light on when an animatronic passes by. The moment a jump scare occurs, the player camera will be warped into that gray sphere out of bounds. And although I wasn't able to get a very good shot of it, we can see that our attacker is quickly moved inside with us. Moving the camera back down to the office while this happens is pretty interesting though, because as this animation is happening, the camera screen and control panel have been unloaded. The buttons on top, however, are still intact, except they're just floating there now. Of course, we can watch the jump scares themselves in bullet time, and it's pretty neat. As you can see, they're mostly faithful recreations of the original animations in FNAF 1, and it's cool to see them not only in a fully 3D space, but also from a perspective we're not typically able to. After the animation finishes, a small rectangle of static appears and fills the camera until we are taken to the Game Over screen. After arriving on this map, there are two buttons in front of us, one taking us back to the hub, and the other restarting the level. There's also a TV on the table in front of us displaying the classic Game Over screen from the first game. Moving the camera back, we can see that this area surrounded by curtains rests on a piece of red checker flooring. But beyond the curtain itself, it just comes to an end. Just beneath the floor, we can also find a bit of text reading, "You are dead." Now, we will be coming back to this area in just a bit, but for now, I want to talk about Night 5. So in order to access Night 5, you must hit the black light switch on the left side of the level select monitor. Doing so will change the lighting in the hub itself, and everything will take on a neon appearance, including the balloons and the glitch trap that is standing behind us in the restroom area. When the switch is active, the level select menu is also changed, as it now only contains the black light levels. These are levels with a bit higher difficulty, and they're also visually altered in some way or another. As for Night 5 itself, we can see that the moment we load in, everything is in black and white. That's not the only thing that's changed, as the cupcake on our desk has also been swapped with our Nightmare variant. For the most part, this night progresses as normal, except for the doors and lights glitching out randomly. As for the animatronics themselves, the models we see roaming the pizzeria are unchanged, but the jump scare models are a different story. What you're looking at now is Neon Chica's jump scare, and as you can see, they are a bit different in appearance. On this night, each of the main cast has been replaced by their blacklight alternatives. This includes Neon Chica, Dark Freddy, Neon Bonnie, and Burnt Foxy. Dark Freddy seems to be heavily based on Shadow Freddy, who appears in FNAF 2, and for more reasons than you'd first think. With the lighting effects turned on, they are solid black, except for their glowing white teeth and eyes. With these effects disabled though, we'll see that they share the same purple tint as Shadow Freddy as well. Only, now their eyes and teeth are solid red. Neon Bonnie is mostly desaturated in this level, appearing mostly black and gray, even with the grayscale effect turned off. They have a slightly more withered appearance, and with the lighting effects turned on, they are illuminated in a purplish color as this animation plays out. Finally, Burnt Foxy is just as his name insists, a severely burnt version of the original animatronic. Their left eye is a solid yellow color, and the exterior of their suit is covered in a charred, molten texture. Now, since we're taking a look at the jump scares, it wouldn't be fair if I didn't at least mention Mr. Cupcake. So, when we enter the Game Over screen after dying in a blacklight level, Mr. Cupcake will no longer be on top of the TV. Instead, they'll be sitting atop the table on our left. Trying to pick them up will result in the player being jump scared. But how does this work off camera? Well, as you can see, the moment we click on the cupcake, they will appear beneath the table and quickly move in front of the camera. After this animation ends, they'll be moved underneath the map, but their position is still tied to the player's camera, meaning they'll move around beneath the map as the player looks around. But with that, we've come to the end of the FNAF 1 levels in Five Nights at Freddy's Help Wanted. So in the FNAF 2 location, we are once again stationed in the security office of a Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria. As you may have guessed, there are no doors in this location, only a long hallway directly in front of us, and 2 vents on either side of our desk. In order to survive the night, you must keep tabs on your cameras, while simultaneously using your desk lights to spot the encroaching animatronics. If they manage to reach your office, you have to quickly put on your Freddy Fazbear mask in order to trick them into leaving. This does not work on the puppet, however, as the only way to prevent them from jump scaring you is to keep their music box wound. Nights 5 and 6 are black light levels, meaning their lighting is entirely different than the first 4 nights, and the AI are a lot more aggressive. On night 6 though, the lights are changed in color once more, and the rest of the withered animatronics will now be active, resulting in a much more challenging night. Recap aside, let's take a look at this map from a different perspective. So after turning the lights on, I wanted to move the camera through the map and take a look at each of the animatronics in their starting positions. In the very back of the restaurant, we can see 3 of the withered animatronics all sitting dormant in the corner of this back room. Withered Bonnie is sitting upright in the corner, looking as menacing as ever, while the other 2 have definitely seen better days. Freddy is in some kind of inverted Family Guy death pose, with his leg bent at a 90-degree angle and his fingers broken in all different directions. Withered Chica is definitely a bit worse for wear, and her severed leg is standing upright in front of her. Something I noticed while inspecting her model though, is what I believe to be blood covering the inside of her mouth. The jaws of her endoskeleton are coated in what I assume to be a splatter of blood, which is a pretty gruesome detail that would be easy to miss during regular gameplay. If we move beneath the map, we can see that her other arm is sticking straight down through the floor. And while observing this, I realized that this is where Foxy is stored before he is brought to the map. Our main man Foxy here will remain underneath this room until they are warped into the hallway. And after the player wards them off with a flashlight, they will be moved into the back with the other withered animatronics. As for the rest of these guys, they will only start moving on night 6, so we'll come back to them a little bit later. Heading over to the toy animatronics, they're standing next to each other in their starting positions. They will always start the night in the same position, where all 3 are visible on camera 9. However, because of the placement of the camera and the dark lighting, it'd be hard to see that all 3 characters are clipping through each other. Bonnie's left arm is sticking through Freddy's side, and Freddy's left arm is clipping all the way through Chica. From the front, this looks a bit messed up, but when viewed from the back, it almost looks like their arms are locked Wizard of Oz style. Among these animatronics is Balloon Boy, who starts off in the same room as the puppet. The moment he becomes active, he'll be moved just beneath the room he starts in, where he will remain until he is warped closer to the office. Now, Balloon Boy only attacks a player through the vent on our left, and the way this works is actually interesting. So we can't typically see inside the vents unless we turn their lights on. But as you'll be able to see with the lighting effects disabled, there is a black barrier placed at the entrance, which prevents us from seeing inside. Heading inside the vents, they take a 90-degree turn and then simply come to an end. Just beyond the office walls, we can see there are 2 more sections of vent placed on either side of the player, and these particular assets are floating disconnected from the rest of the map. These segments are used when an animatronic, such as Balloon Boy, begins approaching your office through the vents. And when this occurs, they'll be warped into the exact ventilation area, which we can see through our cameras. After a brief moment, they'll then jump across into the next section, where they can then enter our office. Unlike the other enemies we face in this location, Balloon Boy is incapable of jump scaring the player. And when we put on the Freddy mask, they will immediately run out of the vent and into the hallway. We can watch this from another perspective, where we'll see he teleports backwards a small distance before running out. He'll then sprint past our desk and into the main hallway, where he's then sent back to his starting position. As for the other animatronics, we can watch as they walk through the building and warp between locations. For instance, the moment Toy Bonnie becomes active, they'll jump over here and walk past the bathrooms before being moved underneath the map temporarily. From here, they'll be sent all the way across the level to what I believe is one of the party rooms, which are stored separately from the rest of the map. As for the main hallway in front of us, each of these doors leads directly out of bounds. When an animatronic reaches one of said doorways, they'll be sent back to the party room area. Only in this case, they're now standing at the entrance to the ventilation system. Multiple enemies can attack us this way at once, and it's pretty cool being able to see not 1, not 2, but 3 animatronics inside the vents at the same time. So when the animatronics reach our office, they'll stand in front of our desk, which forces us to put on our mask, or we will eventually be jump scared. What's interesting is that while Chica was standing in our office, I found Freddy had been moved beneath the map right below our desk. I'm not sure why he was placed here. I'm assuming it's because Chica was already in the office when Freddy was meant to attack, but if you know why this occurred, let me know in the comments. Something else I noticed that's kind of funny is that when we ward off Mangle using the Freddy mask, we can see that they are quickly moved out of our office. This movement is so fast that even in bullet time, we can barely see it happening. It's a bit odd too because, to my knowledge, the other animatronics vanished right away when leaving the office. Mangle seems to be the only exception. Next, let's have a look at the puppet. Unlike the rest of this robotic cast, the puppet does not navigate the pizzeria as they approach the player. Instead, the music box must be wound in order to prevent an unavoidable death as they walk down the hallway to jump scare us. If we move the camera over to the prize counter, we can see the blue and purple box placed just beside the counter. And it just so happens Mangle had the same idea, as they're over here keeping the marionette company. Moving the camera inside the box itself, we'll see that the puppet is bent all the way over inside it, with their arms tucked underneath their legs. Their model is pretty tall, so I was a bit surprised they fit in this box so neatly. When the music box runs out, the box will flip open with a burst of confetti, and the marionette will basically unfold their body as they stand upright. After a quick, spooky hula dance, their model will reset into a folded position within the box. Now, I didn't realize this at first, but the moment the puppet is activated, the rest of the animatronics on this map will be completely unloaded. Moving the camera throughout the map is a bit eerie now, because this location is typically never this empty. Though, we're not completely on our own. Even though Toy Chica has been unloaded, her cupcake still exists on this map, and it is floating just beneath the floor. I guess this just proves that Mr. Cupcake really is the strongest animatronic of them all. Shortly after the puppet's initial animation finishes, they'll be warped into the hallway in front of us and begin walking to our office. They really are quite massive, considering they can't even stand upright in this corridor without their head touching the ceiling. When they eventually reach our office, the player camera will be warped way into the sky, where the jumpscare animation will play out. So back inside the map, I decided to teleport our player around and see what happens, because even though we're unable to walk around, we can still move the player themselves throughout the pizzeria. I took a stroll over to the toy animatronics, and we can get as close as we want, because there are of course no jump scare triggers tied to these models. Heading over to the prize counter, we can move the player on top of the puppet's box, which is kinda neat, and even stand in front of it when they pop out. If we move the player into the main hallway, you can see that when they warp here and begin heading to our office, they will walk straight through us like we're not even here. Next, let's take a look at the Freddy mask. So when one of our robotic foes enters our office, we use this mask in order to trick them into leaving. But how exactly does it work? Well, viewing this from another angle, we can see that the mask instantly warps in front of the player camera. It is also tied to our camera so that when we look around, the mask moves with us, which looks pretty funny from this perspective. When the mask is taken off, it will return to its starting position on the cardboard box beside us. Now at this point, I want to see what would happen if we move the player onto the pizzeria and then equip the Freddy mask. And I wasn't disappointed. With the player controller placed at the end of the hallway, I put the mask on, and it still appears on our head instantaneously. When taking it off though, the mask will then float all the way back to its starting position. Something else I noticed is that when the mask is in transit, if the player looks around, the mask will move with it. I then warped the player into the party rooms and equipped the mask, where I realized that the mask's acceleration changes depending on how far it has traveled. So by continuously pressing the spacebar, we can make it move ridiculously fast. So heading into night 5, I was curious what the rest of this pizzeria looked like in this altered lighting. And while flying around, you'll see that the black light effects will fade in and out depending on how far away you are from the map. Something else I noticed is that the Freddy mask also looks a lot different on this particular night. With the post-processing effects enabled, the mask itself is a bit glossy in appearance, and because of the lighting in our office, it has a purple tint to it. You would usually never be able to tell, but with these effects disabled, we'll find that the mask is actually a metallic silver color instead. Just behind our desk, there are some shelves and open lockers, and among the other merchandise is a Mr. Cupcake plush. For some reason though, they're a bit camera shy, and no matter what angle we look at them from, they'll always be looking the other way. Of course, Mr. Cupcake wouldn't be complete without Chica, and flying through the restaurant, we'll find that something isn't right with her either. And by that, I mean she's sunken into the floor up to her shins. I know the animatronics get quirky at night, but this is just ridiculous. On night 6, the lighting once again changes, and our office now has a reddish purple tint to it. The rest of the cast are now active as well, and will begin their assault on the poor night guard. Similar to the toy animatronics, Withered Bonnie will walk down the center of the main hallway before coming to a stop. This model in particular looks downright terrifying in this lighting, and it's highly unsettling as they stare us down from the shadows. We can also watch as Withered Freddy stomps into our office, where he will assume a similar position to Toy Freddy. I realized at this moment that he was not alone, because Chica and Foxy decide to join him. They almost look like they're standing in line at the supermarket, which makes this whole thing a little less scary. Nope, it's still horrifying. And speaking of scary, there are circumstances where both the toy and withered version of Freddy will be loaded into the same location. Because of this, they'll clip through each other's models, which results in a nightmarish fusion of Freddy's. Now, for the most part, the toy animatronic jump scares are simply them lunging towards the camera, but the withered animatronics are a bit more interesting. Bonnie, for example, will remain far below the camera for a moment before being quickly moved up into frame where his animation plays out. Even more terrifying, Chica will behave the same way, except her arms will stick straight out and her eyes are rolled back into her head. Like Bonnie, she will then be moved upwards into frame where she begins biting at the camera, resulting in one frightening jump scare. Finally, after completing the Withered Night, I want to take a look at what happens when we open the prize box on the table. As you can see, the box is currently empty inside, but after spinning the handle a few times, it will burst open with some confetti. Only, for some reason, our prize launched upwards through the ceiling, and it never came back down. Glorious? But with that, that's everything I found hidden off camera in the FNAF 2 section of Help Wanted. So arriving at Fazbear's Fright, the horror attraction, we're stationed in the security office where we're surrounded by 3 different screens, each serving a unique purpose. Directly in front of us is the primary surveillance system that overlooks the main attraction areas, and attached to the controls is a button that plays Balloon Boy's sound effects. This is used to lure Springtrap, this level's only life-threatening animatronic, into the map's various rooms and away from our always exposed office. On the right side is the ventilation camera system, which contains a button used to seal off the vents, preventing Springtrap from reaching the player through them. Finally, there is the maintenance panel on our left, and this is used to fix the various errors that we can encounter throughout the night. We must use each of these tools to keep Springtrap at bay, while also avoiding the phantom animatronics as they appear within the attraction. They are non-lethal, but being jump scared by them results in our cameras and tools being broken. Recap aside, we can explore this building and take a look at some things we're not usually able to see up close. This entire map is full of decorations and props from previous entries in the series, including a box full of animatronic pieces that is stored inside of our office. Inside this box, there are 3 masks, including Freddy, Mangle, and Toy Bonnie, as well as a few severed arms and Bonnie's guitar. What's odd is that there are also some paper scraps down inside, but I'm not sure why they're floating here, considering you'll never be able to see them. I had looked throughout the entire facility, but I was unable to locate Springtrap inside. And that's because when the night begins, he's actually stored far beneath the map until he is activated. Taking a closer look at his model, we'll see that it's a lot scarier than you'd first realize. The costume itself is pretty worn, and because of the tears in the exterior, we can see some of the metallic parts that make up the suit. Moving the camera inside the model though, we can see the spring lock mechanism is fully modeled inside, and is shrouded in what looks like human entrails. Glorious? No, gruesome. It gets even more gruesome though, because although it's hard to see, looking inside the mask, we will find the rotted remains of William Afton's head. This particular model is really creepy, and the minigame as a whole is even scarier, knowing what lurks inside the Springlock suit. Now, speaking of Springtrap, we can see how they function within this level as well. So he'll be activated on the second night and begin his assault on the player. And as you can see, the moment he is called into the map, he will instantly warp from the void into one of the hallways. Once there, we can observe him moving between locations as he slowly walks forward and then snaps into his idle pose. These walk cycles are even more frightening with the post-processing effects enabled, as their glowing eyes can be seen peering through the darkness. Next, let's have a look at the Phantom animatronics. So the way these enemies work is completely different than Springtrap, because instead of approaching the player through the hallways, they'll load into a static location, and we have to avoid looking at them to prevent being jump scared. So, just like Springtrap, before they appear on any of our cameras, Balloon Boy can be found beneath this map. They are technically active at this point, and will remain out of bounds until they are meant to appear in our cameras. But how exactly does that work? Well, the instant they are called into the map, they'll simply be warped in their current state directly in front of a camera. You can see here that they are literally just floating right in the corner T-posing and staring at the wall. Because of how closely they are placed to the camera though, only half of their face is visible on screen. If we do not swap to a different camera in time, we will ultimately be jump scared. And the moment this happens, the Balloon Boy that is currently visible on our monitor will be instantly warped away from the camera, and a separate jump scare model is loaded in that will then lunge at the player. From another perspective, we can take a look around and see how they move with us due to the model being tied directly to the player camera. And it's pretty hilarious. Moving the camera beneath the floor during this animation, you'll find the original Balloon Boy has been moved back to their idle location. Phantom Foxy will load into our office just behind the box of animatronic parts, and upon closer inspection, they're clipping through the wall for some reason. I'm not sure why he chooses to put his head through a wall when he's standing right next to the door, but that's none of my business. Must be flexing his ghostly powers. Phantom Foxy will remain here for quite a while actually, and can only jump scare the player if we look directly at him. Now this is where things get a bit odd, because when this is triggered, we can see that their jump scare model is this white, strangely shaped outline. At first I thought this was due to the game's lighting being disabled, but with the processing turned back on, it is still the same in appearance. On night 3, we can head underneath the map, where we can see that Mangle is now stored here as well. Only they're placed in the same location as Balloon Boy, which results in this strange spider-like fusion of animatronics. When Mangle becomes visible on our ventilation cameras, you can see that they've been moved from their idle position out of bounds and are now placed in front of camera 12. Heading over there, with the camera reveals that half their body is clipping beneath the map, but we never see it due to the angle in which this is typically viewed. When Mangle successfully attacks a player, we can see that their jump scare model is rotated upside down when it's moved to the player, and they'll snap their jaws at us before unloading completely. Among these enemies, there's also Freddy, who will walk past this large window in our office before disappearing after reaching the end of the hallway. Taking a closer look at them, we'll realize that unlike the other Phantoms, the majority of Freddy's endoskeleton is still intact, and is plainly visible to the player. And it looks pretty cool. They will slowly make their way down this hall, and as they reach this corner here, they will very quickly sink into the floor. What I found kinda strange is that Freddy and Foxy are not stored out of bounds like the others, and when they sink through the floor, they will unload completely. Now something else I found a bit weird is that Phantom Freddy's jump scare does not function how it's meant to. So when looking at Freddy, there's a chance that his scare will trigger, but it does not use the appropriate model. Instead, it will use the same white outline as Foxy's. In this shot, you can see both of them being triggered one after the other, and they are practically identical. This is apparently a bug that was never fixed in the non-VR version of the game. And to my understanding, his jump scare works as intended in the VR version. Heading into night 5, this area's blacklight level, Springtrap becomes a lot more aggressive, and the building is now on fire. If we look to the restaurant though, it is pretty much unchanged, aside from the lighting now being a reddish-orange color. But there are no visible fires anywhere within the building itself. Inside the vents on the right, there are some particles floating around that look like embers, and beyond the vents themselves is a video of some flames playing on loop. It's just floating out of bounds, and we can actually see it from within our office. So I'm not certain how I caused it, but at some point the game's logic had been broken, and Springtrap was completely unloaded. The Phantoms still attacked the office, but nothing needed to be done about it because there was no real threat present, meaning the rest of Night 5 was a breeze. That's it for the FNAF 3 area though, so let's take a look at the dark rooms. So to quickly recap these levels, the dark rooms have you play a handful of unique minigames, all of which take place in complete darkness. In the Plush Trap game, our goal is simple. We have 90 seconds to flash Plush Trap with our light when they're sitting atop of the X in front of us. Only they won't move when our flashlight is on, so we have to rely on sound in order to catch them at the right moment. The Balloon Boy minigame functions the same way, only they are a bit faster and moving towards the player. Next, there is the Plush Baby game, and here you use a flashlight to ward off an army of circus baby stuffed animals as they endlessly approach you. I know what you're thinking, but trust me, it's scarier than it sounds, as failing to do so will result in a jump scare. We must survive until 6 AM, shining our light on the plush babies until they disappear, while also trying to conserve our flashlight battery, which recharges over time. Finally, there is the Funtime Foxy minigame, and in this level, we're forced to navigate this massive room as we aim to reach the door to parts and service. Instead of a flashlight, we're given a flash beacon in this level that will light up the area surrounding the player temporarily, and doing so is the only way to locate Funtime Foxy. Walking into them results in an instant death, so we have to avoid them as we progress through this map. So heading back to the Plush Trap game, this entire area is a lot less spooky when we see what's happening. Now moving the camera around, you will immediately notice, in addition to this map, that we aren't typically able to see, which is the bedroom and house area that you can play in during the FNAF 4 minigame. A majority of the section's assets are missing, and we can see there is some furniture sitting just out of bounds as well. I'm not certain as to why this was added onto the Plush Trap level though, but if you know why, then let me know in the comments. Heading back to the main gameplay area, Plush Trap is sitting on a chair at the end of the hallway, and you can see that when they move, they will quickly climb down and sit on the floor. I found this pretty cool, because a majority of players would never be able to see these animations in their entirety because of how dark these games are. Plush Trap then runs into the room on the right, where he is then warped far beneath the level, and he will remain here until his next movement. The rooms surrounding the player are completely empty, and we can see that when Plush Trap peeks around the corner, he will instantly teleport back into the play area. What's funny is that after ducking into this room, their body becomes super contorted. As some of you may recall, the same thing happens in the glitched attraction, when Vanny's peeking around the corner in the ventilation area's title screen. Plush Trap will remain in this twisted pose until they move back into the hallway, where they'll once again run off camera into one of these empty rooms. Taking a look at this level's blacklight variant is mostly the same, except there are a handful of toys scattered throughout the hallway, alongside some decorations that I believe appeared in FNAF 2. Nightmare Balloon Boy functions mostly identical to Plush Trap, except he's a bit faster when navigating the hallway. When peeking out at the player, their head violently shakes, which is super unsettling to watch. And yes, they also get twisted up when moving around the corner. The blacklight variant of this night fills the entire play area with balloons, making it a lot harder to see where Balloon Boy is hiding. Jumping ahead, we can take a look at Plush Baby's minigame, and I was mostly curious what happens when they're scared off by the flashlights at the beginning of the night. So there are 3 Plush Baby stuffed animals just sitting in front of this vent, and as we shine our flashlight at them, they'll begin to shake around before disappearing into the vent. Viewing this from the other side reveals that they unload the moment they pass through the grate. As for the map itself, it is packed full of FNAF-inspired merchandise, and though there are a few doors surrounding us, none of them actually lead anywhere, nor does the vent above the player. Something you may have missed is that directly in front of the player, there is a small white cube sticking through the floor. You can actually see this cube during regular gameplay, as it's just placed on the floor directly in front of the player. In the blacklight version of this game, each of the stuffed animals we see in this map are replaced with Plush Baby. Although the enemies themselves have been replaced with scrap Plush Baby, it's still super hard to locate them before they jump scare you, even when all the lights are on. Also, the player is just a floating flashlight sticking through a door. Glorious! Finally, there is a Funtime Foxy minigame, and as you can see, this map is actually pretty huge. There are tons of pipes above the player that extend upwards out of sight, and because the level is so dark, there was no need for a ceiling either. Now, I expected this level to be pretty easy with the lights on, but I couldn't have been more wrong. So when we start this level, Foxy can be seen appearing behind a door before it recloses. But from another angle, you can see that they're unloaded completely right after this animation is finished. What makes things difficult in this level is that Foxy will only appear when our flashlight beacon is used, meaning even with the lights on, they're still incredibly hard to avoid. The second we use our light, they'll load in, and after it goes dark, they'll vanish once more. The jump scare is also pretty terrifying, as their faceplate opens up to reveal the nightmarish endoskeleton inside. Heading into the black light mode, this level is made a lot harder by all the animatronics blocking our path. The room is now full of circus babies, Funtime Freddys, Funtime Foxies, and even a couple of endoskeletons. Apparently these endos belong to Neon Bonnie, and as you can see, running into them results in their jump scare being triggered. On this night, the Foxy that we typically face has been replaced by a reskinned variant of their model, who I believe is called Lolbit. And here, you can see these two animatronics standing side by side. Finally, I was curious what would happen if we placed the player on top of this map and then tried to finish the level. And for a while, it seemed to be working. That is, until Lolbit managed to jump scare me from way up here. Not all is lost though, because I had one more trick up my sleeve, and so I just teleported the player to the end of the level, finishing the night pretty much instantly. And with that, we've reached the end of the FNAF 3 and Darkroom levels and Help Wanted. When dealing with horrific killer animatronics, you're bound to face a few hiccups along the way. In parts and service, the shoe is on the other foot though. And these robotic mascots actually need our help before they can get back to performing on stage. We'll also be putting our hard hat on and repairing some ventilation systems to maintain that perfect 72 degrees. Today, we'll be taking a closer look at these repair minigames as we dissect how they work behind the scenes. Each of these minigames involves a player performing maintenance on the original cast of animatronics. Starting with Bonnie, their guitar is out of tune, and in order to fix it, you have to remove their faceplate by taking their eyes out and then pressing the buttons on their jaw. In doing so, Bonnie's harmonization module can be accessed, and we simply correct the sour note by pressing the corresponding button. Once completed, we then reverse our steps in order to close them up. As for Chica, some pizza must be removed from their exterior before we can open up their beak using some buttons. We then use some chemical spray to remove some insects as we reattach her arm and then place a cupcake plate in her hand. We then eat some pizza to finish the night. In Freddy's minigame, we must remove a child's hat from his mouth before opening up his chest cavity, where we then have to remove a wristwatch as well. There's also a shoe stuck inside, and we must extract the music box before we can access it. When replacing the music box, the player will drop it, which Freddy doesn't seem too happy about. And once complete, we'll then press his nose and close up his chest cavity. Finally, there's Foxy, who looks to be in pretty bad shape. You must first put his head back on, which results in him malfunctioning and beginning to move unpredictably. In order to fix this, a handful of fuses need to be replaced, which is made difficult by his sporadic movement. After doing so, we then put Foxy's eye back in its socket, bringing this night to a close. Throughout these minigames, even a single mistake will result in a jump scare, and the blacklight versions of these levels make things even harder. The lighting and models are changed, as well as the repair process being slightly different on some nights, which I'll be explaining as we go. Recap aside, let's head back to Bonnie's night and brand things up. So moving the camera back a bit, we'll see this entire minigame takes place atop a small piece of checkered flooring that is just floating here. The darkness usually obscures your view of the surrounding area, so you'd never know this level comes to an end just out of the player's sight. Something I wanted to check out was what happens when we deposit Bonnie's eyes into the cleaning receptacles. And as you can see, when we drop the eye inside, it'll fall down towards this hole before unloading. The machine begins making noise, and after a few seconds, the eye will pop back into existence right here in front of us. With her eyes removed, Bonnie's model is pretty sinister looking, and it only gets worse when we open up their faceplate. In their current state, they look similar in appearance to withered Bonnie, which is pretty creepy. Something else I noticed is that when moving the camera behind Bonnie, we can see straight into their animatronic suit. Their back is not visible from this angle, but when moving inside of their model, we'll see that this particular section is only visible from the inside. Of course, we will never know this because the player is incapable of looking at them from this perspective. The jump scares in parts and service are pretty neat because depending on how we interacted with these animatronics, these animations will be changed as well. As you can see, we have Bonnie's faceplate in the upright position, and by triggering a jump scare, we'll see that it will still be open when the player is warped up to the jump scare location within this map. Something I found a bit odd though, is that when only a single eye is attached, during their jump scare it will be in the wrong socket. Something else you may have noticed is that Bonnie's guitar is not completely intact either, as the buttons we use for tuning this instrument are not present during their jump scare sequence. Bonnie's blacklight minigame is mostly the same as the original, except their lighting and music have changed, and Bonnie has been replaced by their hard mode variant, Neon Bonnie, also known as Beacon Bonnie. Now, we've seen this animatronic in previous levels, including Night 6 of the FNAF 1 area and the Funtime Foxy level in the Dark Rooms. In this minigame though, the texture has been properly applied to Bonnie's model and is not glitching out. Well, that is until we get jump scared, where it appears once more. The map surrounding the player is also a bit different, with the inclusion of these hanging star decorations and explosions of confetti raining down on top of us. That's it for Bonnie though, so let's take a look at Chica's night. So first things first, we can take a look at this map, and you'll immediately notice that this location is quite a bit different from Bonnie's. Although they both take place on a piece of checkered flooring, there is a large, white, one-sided sphere surrounding the gameplay area here. While taking a look out of bounds, I also noticed something a bit strange. Directly underneath Chica, there is a small, yellow, crescent-shaped object floating in the void. Anytime I move the camera closer, it would unload though. I'm not sure if it was a bounding box issue with the game thinking it shouldn't render the object or what, so I was unable to see exactly what it was. If any of you might know what this is, let me know in the comments. Up above the player, we can see that the chemical spray mechanism just comes to an end just out of the player's view. So kind of like Bonnie, if we take a look behind Chica, the back of her head is not visible from the outside. Once again, if we take a look from the inside of their suit, we can see that this part of her model can only be seen from one side. Next, I want to see what happens when cockroaches begin crawling out of Chica's head. And as you can see, they'll load in directly behind her left eye before making their way to the suit's exterior. What's interesting is that as they crawl around, they will eventually come back to the spot where they're clipping through her endoskeleton. They'll stay here for just a moment before they continue crawling through Chica's suit. We can also see that when multiple roaches end up here, they'll clip into one another seamlessly. As for Chica's blacklight level, we can see that her standard model has been replaced with Neon Chica, and there are now massive roaches circling the player. This night is mostly the same, except the chemical spray only works once. And after that, we'll have to remove the roaches from Chica's suit individually by hand. Mr. Cupcake has also been replaced by Nightmare Cupcake as well. Moving the camera to these roaches out of bounds, we'll see that they are quite large. With the lighting effects disabled, they are a greenish-brown color as opposed to the neon red we typically see. Moving the camera back, you'll notice that they're actually rotating just beyond the white sphere that surrounds this level. What's interesting is that even if we freeze time, these particular roaches are unaffected for some reason, but not completely. Even though they're still circling around us, their animations are tied to the game's speed. So if we speed the game up, they'll run extremely fast. It's super funny watching them scurry like this while still moving at a brisk pace. Glorious! But now let's jump ahead to Freddy's minigame. Loading into this map, we'll find we are surrounded by workbenches, toolboxes, and a few cardboard boxes. Freddy is sitting on a small metal box in front of us, waiting for the player to fix them up. Now for the most part, there isn't much to look at in this level, besides the floating ceiling? The roof of this map has a small light on it that helps illuminate this area, but it's not actually attached to anything. Inside of Freddy's suit, we can see his inner machinations alongside the objects we must extract, including a child's shoe. During regular gameplay, it would be hard to notice that it's just clipping through the back of his model. This level's hard mode variation is probably the most modified of the parts and service minigames, as the majority of our surroundings have been changed. Freddy is now jet black in appearance, with his facial features glowing white, and as we look around this room, these screens of static will begin turning on around us. There are silhouettes of toys floating in this area, and we are also surrounded by a bunch of Freddys. This level has a grayscale effect applied as well, so everything we see is black and white. Now, moving the camera around, you'll see that these screens are actually just looping flat videos, placed within the white sphere surrounding this location. We can also take a closer look at the animatronics on this map, and they're pretty terrifying up close. They quickly shake side to side as they stare the player down, and we can even freeze time to see their models in all their glory. With the processing effects disabled, it's a bit easier to see this map in its entirety, including the fact that the floor is missing. There are a few assets from the original map still present, but everything else has been removed, including the ground beneath our feet. Freddy also looks quite a bit different, as their suit is now a flat gray texture, and their eyes and teeth are solid red. Their endoskeleton and other mechanical parts are unchanged, however. Heading to Foxy's night, if we take a look beneath the map, there's a small object placed here that I do not recognize. It's a small, almost puzzle-shaped object that is covered in a basic grid material. It's directly underneath Foxy, but I'm not certain of its purpose. But now let's take a look at Foxy's jump scare, because it is definitely the most unique in the parts and service minigame. So when Foxy jump scares the player, the lights will dim for a second before coming back in to reveal they have now disappeared. After a few seconds, they will come sprinting at us from the darkness before ultimately jump scaring us. With the lights on, we can see how Foxy will just vanish instantly when making a mistake. As Foxy reappears to attack the player, they'll load back in just beyond the map's checkered flooring. They then sprint towards the player, and once close enough, they'll be moved to a gray sphere above this map where the jump scare then plays out. Something you'll notice is that even though Foxy's eye has not been reattached yet, during their jump scare, both eyes will be in their proper place. Now, something I find pretty funny is that when Foxy is still running at you, their position is tied to the player's camera, meaning they will always be in the center of your vision. And from another perspective, we can watch them slide across the floor as we move our camera in-game. Heading into Foxy's blacklight level, there are embers and smoke surrounding the gameplay area as we perform our maintenance tasks. Their left eye is glowing brightly, and their body is burnt and charred from top to bottom. If we brighten things up and take a quick look at the map, we'll see that this night takes place atop a burnt wooden floor. Most of the platform is covered in black charring, and there are also these molten cracks growing outward from the center. That's everything I found in the parts and service minigames though, so now let's take a dive into vent repair. So in vent repair, there are 2 nights to complete, and both of these nights have a blacklight variant as well. On Mangle's night, we're placed within the ventilation system of a Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, and after pressing a button and pulling a lever, we'll find that Mangle is in here with us. From here, our objective is to complete a handful of tasks, including a game of Simon Says, turning some valves to stop the leaking pipes, and pulling levers in the correct order to complete the night. All the while, Mangle will be attacking the player through these ventilation ducts and must be stopped using our flashlight. Once complete, the doors will close and we can move on to night 2. The second night brings us to Circus Baby's Entertainment and Rental, where we have a lot more on our plate. We will complete several puzzles as we make our way down this massive elevator shaft to the boiler room, with each section growing harder than the previous. First up is the breaker room, where you must press some buttons in the correct order by following their wires to the corresponding breaker boxes. In the third vent, Ennard will begin moving throughout this room, only becoming visible during the intermittent flashes of light. If you make too many mistakes or do not complete this puzzle in time, you'll ultimately be jump scared by Ennard. After completing this section, Ennard will attempt to reach us through the closing gate. Next, there's a series of gears that must be moved in the correct order before we can progress. Ennard will also be moving throughout this area, and you have to avoid looking at them for too long to avoid a jump scare. In the final section, there are a couple of pipes that must be rotated in order to finish our repairs within the boiler room. And once completed, flames will lighten up the boiler, and we hear Ennard screeching from off camera, bringing this night to a close. Heading back to Mangle's night, we can move the camera back for a better look at this location, and we'll see that it is a large, plus-shaped vent system with a player being placed in the center. While taking a look at the map, I noticed Mangle was in an idle pose, just chilling underneath of us. As I moved the camera around, I saw they were flashing between their regular texture and this black and white one. I have a hunch as to why this is, which I'll get to in just a moment. So when we initially turn the lights on, Mangle appears directly in front of the player before bolting back into the darkness. With the lighting effects disabled, you'll see that they immediately load in here when we hit that switch, before receding back into the vent, where they will be moved back to their idle location in the void. Something I found kind of interesting is that this night's jump scare actually takes place beneath the map near their idle location, as opposed to the gray sphere we've seen in previous minigames. In the blacklight version of this level, it's mostly the same except the lights will be changed, and all the vents are opened immediately instead of opening as we progress. Another difference is that Shadow Mangle will begin their assault on the player alongside their standard counterpart. We can actually watch as both of these animatronics approach us at once, and it's nothing short of horrifying. As for the flickering model I mentioned earlier, I believe this is because these characters are stored in the exact same location beneath this level, resulting in their models Z-fighting with being rendered as they're clipping through each other. As you can see, when Mangle jump scares a player, they are moved to the side, and Shadow Mangle remains in the original position. Finally, there's a chance when loading into this level that Endo02 will appear beneath the player in this vertical duct. They're holding onto the steel grates we're standing on with their feet against the wall, and they'll remain down here until the night ends or the player restarts. We can't typically get a good look at them from this angle, but if we delete the vent cover, we can see them in all their glory. They are completely harmless, but this is definitely not something I want to see looking up at me, especially in the dark. That's all I could find in this location though, so let's jump ahead to Ennard's night and have a look around. First off, we can take a look at the area we load into, as it's a fully modeled room. We'll be taking another look at this room a bit later, but for now we can follow the elevator shaft down and see all the areas we will eventually arrive at. In the current state, there are only a handful of props loaded in, such as the buttons and wires used in the breaker room, and the rest of the assets are unloaded to keep game resources down. The moving gates and gears are loaded in down below, as well as the boiler we are ultimately attempting to repair. This elevator shaft is absolutely massive though, and it's pretty cool to see it all in one shot. Way on the distance, we can find Ennard is stored until they're moved into the gameplay area. It's no wonder they only show up a handful of times. This commute must be exhausting. So the way this level works is the moment we start moving down the elevator, the previous floor will unload, and the following one will load in at the same time. The player's vision is obscured at this time, so it appears to be a seamless transition. Each of the vent areas in the breaker room will be loaded in the moment we arrive, and the doors will slide open as we progress. Taking a look inside the third puzzle, it's actually pretty spacious, although there's not a lot inside to look at. We can, however, watch as Ennard teleports between the various locations. This movement is typically hidden by the darkness, but here you can see he's moving around using instant transmission. When Ennard attacks a player here, we can watch from a different angle as they warp above the door and latch onto it, peeking in at the player. The door then slams, and Ennard just kinda chills here upside down. Glorious? After this, we watch the following puzzle as it loads in. And though the previous area has been unloaded, Ennard is still hanging upside down by the door. There isn't much to see in the following areas, but I was curious what happened when we activated the boiler down below. When we press the button, fire will erupt inside, and although we hear a slam followed by Ennard screeching, they are nowhere to be seen. The elevator will begin to rise once more, and the night comes to an end. Finally, we can switch over to the blacklight variation of this level, where we'll see a lot has changed. This map is now full of different assets and animatronic parts, including Foxy's endoskeleton from Parts and Service, and a decapitated Freddy Fazbear. In the elevator shaft, we can find Nightmare Fredbear's head, Funtime Foxy's leg, a decapitated plush baby, Bonnie's bottom jaw and ear, and dozens more that I don't have the time to list off. In the breaker room, the second puzzle now has Springtrap crawling towards the player, meaning you have a limited time to complete this section before you are jump scared. Once completed though, Springtrap will backtrack to their starting location before freezing in place for the rest of the night. After this area unloaded though, I spotted this massive Phantom Freddy that we can see walking around in the distance. They will endlessly circle the gameplay area, and it's pretty scary just how big they are compared to the player. In this section of the elevator, the Nightmare Endo is also present, constantly staring at the player from beyond the elevator. That's not the scariest thing in here though, as just beside us, we'll find Balloon Boy holding Toy Freddy's head on a stick like a balloon. At the end of the level, we'll find that the boiler is now full of some tangled up endoskeletons, and we can watch up close as they begin to burn. The ending in this area is also changed, as Ennard will now leap onto the elevator before it begins plummeting downwards. Things don't look good for either party though, since the elevator is now falling beneath the map itself and directly into the void. And with that, that is everything I found hidden out of bounds in the Parts and Service and vent repair areas. In Night Terrors, there are no camera systems, Freddy masks, or steel doors protecting you. Only a flashlight and your bedroom door stand between you and the nightmares that approach. Today, we'll be taking a look out of bounds at some things you're not usually able to see, like this messed up Nightmare Fredbear. We'll also be exploring the various rooms of Pizza Party and viewing how they work off camera. Now, as we move forward, I'll be recapping each night individually. That way, we're all on the same page for what we'll be covering. So starting off with the first night, it's practically identical to the original FNAF 4 style of gameplay, as your main objective is to monitor the two hallways on either side of the player, as well as the closets in front of you. Funtime Freddy will attempt to reach the bedroom through the halls, and must be deterred using our flashlight. You'd also be wise to listen for breathing when checking the doors, as failing to shut them when Freddy is present results in a jump scare. Bonbon and Bonnet are also threats in this level, though their jump scares are non-fatal. Bonbon will approach the player through the hallways similar to Funtime Freddy, except shining your light results in a jump scare instead of warding them off. Bonnet will appear inside the drawers and closets within the bedroom, and we must flash them with our light to make them leave. After turning the lights on, we can move the camera back for a better look at this bedroom area, where I immediately noticed this object sticking through the wall above the dresser. Upon closer inspection, it looks to be an incomplete version of the camera control panel, clock, and screen that we've seen used in previous minigames. I believe these assets are used a bit later on in this minigame's blacklight level, and this could simply be an oversight by the developers. We can also take a closer look at Bonnet while we're over here, where we'll find that she's just sort of floating inside the drawer. We'll be taking another look at them in just a second though. Moving the camera out into the hallway, we'll see that it just loops around at the end and brings us back to the other side. Just beyond the door, we can see the black pieces of geometry used to block the player's view of the hallway, and it's a bit more complex than the ones we've seen previously. There are actually several of these panels clipping through each other, and they'll be toggled on and off as we move to the door and activate our flashlight. As of right now, there are no animatronics present in the map, and this is because while inactive, they'll be stored beneath the level itself. Bonnet, Bonbon, and Funtime Freddy are all currently idle within the void, waiting to be pulled into the map. And when this occurs, you'll see that they are instantly warped to one of the predetermined locations. Something I was curious about is what happens when we close a door on an encroaching animatronic. As you can see, Freddy is currently at our door attempting to get us, and when closing the door, they will instantly warp back to their idle location. Something similar occurs when we shine a light on them in the hallway. They'll quickly step to the side, just out of the player's view before being moved. The other animatronics work a bit differently though. It turns out the bonnet we see stored underneath the map is actually their jump scare model. This asset will be moved into the bedroom when they successfully jump scare us. But I was curious about what happens to this other model. Well, after some searching, I managed to find them floating sideways far beneath the rest of these idle characters. On the other hand, Bonbon's jump scare model will only be loaded in temporarily. The moment this is triggered, the Bonbon we typically see in the hallway will be moved back to the storage location as the scare plays out. Once completed, it'll be moved beneath the floor, where it then unloads completely. Heading into night 2, there's only one adversary we must face, the Nightmarian. We must last until 6 AM as this horrific puppet endlessly approaches our bedroom, closing the door when they get close to avoid being jump scared. It gets much worse though, as a large hole has opened up in the ceiling and these dark tendrils will begin reaching out. They also come from the closet and underside of our bed, and we have to shine our flashlight on them to stop them from advancing. Brightening things up, we can have a closer look at the construction project in our ceiling, where we'll see that the hole leads directly outside of the map. Taking a look just beneath the closet doors, we'll find 2 separate pieces of text reading Bonbon Stat and Funtime Stat. Moving the camera to the end of the hall, we can find the Nightmarian asserting their dominance by T-posing against the wall. We can also watch from a different perspective as they walk down the hall, and they're actually pretty terrifying. After reaching the door, they'll freeze in place for a bit before ultimately jump scaring the player. Now, there isn't a ton to look at on this map, but what I was most curious about was how the tentacles work off camera. So when the tentacles begin to reach through the ceiling, they'll load in just above the roof and move downwards as they reach out. They look similar in appearance to the Nightmarian's arms, only they aren't connected to anything. We can also take a look beneath the bed, and although it's hard to see due to how dark this level usually is, these tentacles will simply clip through the floor as it begins stretching out into the room. Taking a look inside the closet, we can find 2 more of them entering the room from this empty space in the center of the level. We can also have a look at what happens when shining our flashlight at these disembodied appendages. And from a different perspective, you'll see that they will quickly retract to their starting position out of bounds before unloading. Jumping ahead to night 3, you'll find that you are now stationed inside the bedroom closet alongside a handful of plush babies. Shortly after the night begins, Circus Baby will enter the bedroom from one of the 2 doors on either side of the player, where they search the room briefly before spotting you. They then move into attack, and you'll have to close the doors before they reach you to avoid an untimely demise. With the doors closed, the plush babies surrounding you will begin violently shaking around, and remaining in the dark for too long results in a jump scare. You must survive until 6 AM as Circus Baby tirelessly hunts you down, with only a small margin of error being afforded to you. When viewed from a different perspective, we can see that there are 2 white, one-sided panels placed just within the doorway to the closet itself. Zooming a bit further out, we can see that this entire area is now contained within the same white sphere we've seen used in previous minigames. We can also watch from a different view as Circus Baby enters the room and attacks the player for the first time. She casually strolls into the room, well, as casually as a murderous animatronic can anyway, before turning her head towards us and beginning her approach. When she reaches the closet, she instantly swaps to this hunched over pose, which we can typically only see for a moment after initially closing the doors. Something else you may notice is that while we're holding them closed, the closet doors will begin to darken even though the lighting effects are completely disabled, which looks pretty strange. After enough time has passed, Circus Baby will teleport to a different location in the room where she begins her search once more. Something I find rather interesting is that this animatronic actually has more than one jump scare animation. As you probably know by now, the jump scares in Help Wanted generally take place in a separate location far above the map. But on this particular night, we can see that one of Circus Baby's jump scare animations actually takes place in the same spot as the original animatronic. As you can see, she'll lunge forward into the closet and scream in our face before unloading as the static screen appears in front of us. Now, while I was messing around this map, I noticed something kind of unsettling, and that is Biddy Bab just sitting next to the door near the player's discarded flashlight. Apparently, there is a chance that this small animatronic will spawn in during this night, similar to the endoskeleton in Mangle's vent repair level. As creepy as they look, they are completely harmless to the player, and are only placed here as a neat little Easter egg. It's cool to see them up close, however, considering the room is typically too dark to see a whole lot. At this point, I was curious what would happen if we warped the player to a different spot on this map. And as you can see, that did not go very well. No matter where the player controller is placed, our robotic foe will jump scare us inevitably if the doors are not closed. And to make matters worse, we lose the ability to shut said doors the moment the player leaves the closet. No matter how far we go, she is still able to catch us. Finally, we head into the fourth night, where our epic standoff against Nightmare Fredbear takes place. This night is similar functionally to the first night, as Nightmare Fredbear will approach the bedroom from both hallways and the closets in front of you. You must frequently check each of the doors, closing them when he's present in order to halt his approach. On occasion, he can also appear on the bed behind us, and we'll have to shine our flashlight on him until he leaves, or we will of course die. First things first, I flew over to the hallway to see where Nightmare Fredbear is placed before being moved into the map. And as you can see, he is T-posing at the end of the hallway just beneath the floor. Now as this night plays out, you can hear Fredbear's footsteps coming from somewhere in the house. And the moment this occurs, we can see that Fredbear is moved slightly in the direction of the hallway he has chosen. As he proceeds onward, we can then watch as this horrifying character stomps towards our bedroom door. And even with the lights on, this hallway is now emitting dangerous levels of nope. Something we can see a bit easier with the lights on is what happens when we close the door with Fredbear in the hallway. And as you can see, closing the doors is completely unnecessary. The moment we start closing the door, he practically gives up and moves somewhere else. And in the case where Fredbear reaches the door, if it is not closed in time, he will enter the room to kill us. He teleports backwards a little ways before ducking through the doorway, and upon reaching the player, a jump scare will be triggered. Funtime Freddy also has an animation like this, only instead of a fully animated walk cycle, he will teleport a few times before ultimately catching us. Whether they're walking or teleporting, the only thing that can save you when they reach this point is the clock hitting 6 AM. Otherwise, it's game over. Finally, when Nightmare Fredbear appears on the bed behind our player, we can fly beneath the map where we'll find he's not completely intact. Their severed head is sitting on top of the mattress, and his spinal column is clipping down through the bed and into the floor. He doesn't seem too bothered by this though, as his body is asserting dominance in the void below, T-posing into infinity. Truly glorious. There really isn't much to see on this particular night, so now let's dive into Pizza Party, this minigame's one and only blacklight level. So after loading into night 6, the player finds themselves in this bedroom location once more. Only now things look a bit different. There are plushies surrounding the player, and 2 doors directly in front of you. From here, you begin exploring this massive level, consisting of locations inspired by previous minigames. Each of these rooms has multiple doors that you can go through that ultimately lead you to a separate part of this huge intertwining map. There are a handful of threats present as well, including animatronics that may attack you if you idle too long. In order to reach the end of this level, you must pass through Mangle's hallway and also enter the kitchen to choose a pizza topping. Once these prerequisites have been met, the office in the Fazbear's Fright hallway can now be accessed, which leads the player through a vent and into the party room. We then watch Glitch Trap as they pull the curtain aside and gesture the player to follow them behind the curtains. Following them results in the screen going dark, and after a brief moment, the curtain opens to reveal we're standing center stage within the pizzeria where the player usually selects a level. Now, rewinding time, I was curious to see how this level functions off camera. We can take a look at this bedroom area where we'll see that the hallways behind each door just lead into the void. Moving the camera through to the next section of the level reveals a couple of things. First, these other rooms are currently unloaded to lessen the impact on your machine, though there are a few assets still currently present within. When we go through one of these doors, the player controller will be moved to the corresponding location as the rest of the room's assets are loaded in. Arriving in the West Hall from the first FNAF game, you'll see that these hallways extend outward a short ways before coming to an abrupt end. The office that the first minigame takes place in is mostly intact too. On the far side of this hallway, there is a black barrier in place that prevents the player from seeing Bonnie, who is stored on the other side. After a bit of time has passed, Bonnie will simply walk through this object and into the hallway. From here I entered Mangle's hallway, and taking a look back at the previous room reveals that Bonnie has been reset to their starting position, and the rest of this room's assets are once again unloaded. In the present room, Mangle is stationed on the office ceiling of the FNAF 2 location, and will charge the player when the flashlight is activated. They will unload shortly before reaching the player, and if a door is not chosen in time, the player will be jump scared. Heading into the Fazbear's Fright hallway, we can see that there is a large steel door blocking our access to the office. Moving the camera aside, we'll see that the monitors used in the FNAF 3 minigame are now broken, and the security systems are non-functional. We'll be coming back here in just a moment, but for now, I went through the door on the right, which brings us back to the West Hall. Only now, the doorway on our left is inaccessible. Entering the door on our right brings us to the plush trap hallway, seen previously in the dark room minigames. Taking a look beyond these doors, there are no longer any walls separating these side rooms, though there are now one-sided black panels placed there instead. Leaving this hallway, I ended up back in the bedroom and went through the other door this time, leading to another FNAF 3 inspired hallway. Something I noticed after arriving here is that there's now a visible skybox within this level, which makes it a lot easier to see how this level is actually put together. Each of the rooms we explore in this level are stored within these individual black boxes, and if we fly inside of them, we can see some of the assets that are still loaded in. We can also see that the stage at the end of the game is loaded in, but we'll be taking a closer look at that in just a bit. Next, we enter the puppets room, which is surrounded by tables and balloons. This area is arranged on top of a large piece of checkered flooring, and the only walls present are the edges of the box this section is stored inside of. The puppets animation is practically identical to the one used in the FNAF 2 minigame, and the doors beside them don't lead anywhere. After passing through the Funtime Auditorium, we will arrive at this parts and service inspired location. This area has a few interesting things to look at, including these massive gears, entangled messes of wire, and a handful of doors we can enter. Taking a look beyond the elevator door, directly in front of us, we'll see Ennard just sort of waiting here upside down. After the door opens, Ennard will unload a moment later, and staying here for too long will of course result in a jump scare. Taking the door into the kitchen, we find ourselves in this wide open space that is packed full of kitchenware, shelves, and other miscellaneous objects. There are 2 doors in front of us labeled cheese and pepperoni, and just to the right we'll find Chica herself standing guard. After shining our flashlight on them, Chica will activate and walk towards the player. Shortly thereafter, they'll be warped out of bounds, and the player must quickly choose a door to avoid being killed. After choosing one of the kitchen doors, we can now head back to the Fazbear's Fright hallway, where we'll see that a regular door is now in place of the steel one we had seen earlier. Taking a look inside, we'll find that the surveillance system and desk have been replaced by these tables, balloons, and presents as well. Heading through the vent in front of the player will take us to this area resembling Mangle's vent repair level. This version of the level is a bit more condensed though, and lacks most of the assets we had seen in that particular minigame. Also, there are no spooky endoskeletons beneath our feet, which is a plus. Climbing through the vent above you takes you to the party room. This area has a handful of parts and service animatronics, as well as the cake and pizza we had selected earlier. There's a curtain in front of you that leads to a show stage, and just beyond it, we can find Glitchtrap just kind of dancing out of bounds. Now, I'll admit, at first I was a bit puzzled as to why these were placed out here, which I'll explain in just a second. So there are 2 different endings to this level that can be achieved depending on whether the requirements have been met or not. In the first ending, we can see Glitchtrap appear from behind this curtain, and off camera, we can watch as they load in, stretching the arm unnaturally far in order to open the curtain. Their animation will continue as they beckon the player to follow them, and afterwards, they'll move out of sight again before unloading. Now, when the player enters the show stage, the previous area will be unloaded, and the main hub location will then load in. We'll also find that the Glitchtrap, previously seen dancing in the void, is actually in front of the prize counter. At this point, we're performing on stage as Freddy Fazbear, but when viewing this cutscene from a different angle, we'll find that the stage is completely empty. In the VR version of the game, the player will be holding Freddy's microphone, but because we're currently in the flat mode, there is nothing to be found. Restarting the night and heading back to the party room, we can take a look at this game's hidden ending by entering the employees only door on our right. We can see that there is a one-sided, flat plane placed here, as well as some snow particles that blow into the room. Going through this door will take the player to this snowy outdoor location, which I believe takes place in front of a Christmas tree lot. There's some construction equipment, a billboard that reads, "Coming soon, now hiring," and what looks like a large structure being built in the distance. Moving the camera back, we can see that this area is actually pretty massive, and it's full of interesting props that we can only typically see from far away, including some bloody snowballs, as well as a couple of wooden sheds with danger high voltage signs on the wall, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense considering there are no electrical appliances in or near them. Maybe there's electrical lines underground. I don't know. What's most interesting in this area though are these huge silhouettes on the far side of the map. When viewed up close, we can see that there are 3 flat images placed behind one another, and they appear to be of a building that is still under construction. Although this trick is pretty simple in nature, you wouldn't really be able to tell that these weren't 3D structures with the post-processing effects enabled. Just off to the side, there's also a massive crane, and this object is also completely flat. Zooming a lot further out, we can see how big this mountain range is compared to the level itself, and the size difference is kind of insane. Beyond that, there isn't really a ton for us to look at on this map, but it's definitely cool to see from a different perspective. Finally, let's have a quick look at the glitch trap cutscenes that can take place in the hub. So after the player collects each of the hidden tapes, they'll be instructed on how to defeat Glitch Trap. And after receiving these instructions, they'll then appear in the hub where they try to merge with the player. If they are successful, we'll be moved to their position after the screen goes purple, ultimately leading to a game over screen. Brightening things up, we can see that the area this cutscene takes place in is quite a bit different than the hub we typically see. The floor extends outwards behind us and breaks into these smaller squares. The stage in front of us is mostly empty as well, and we can see straight out of bounds behind it. We can also watch from a different angle as Glitch Trap merges with the player, which looks pretty cool, even with the lighting effects disabled. If the player stops the merge from being completed, we will instead be moved to another location where we're standing in front of a large metal door. When looking through the keyhole, Glitch Trap will appear and shush the player before disappearing into the distance as we're sent back to the main hub. With the lights on, we can take another look at this cutscene, where we'll see that this door is actually connected to what I believe is the West Hall from the Pizza Party minigame. As you can see, Glitch Trap is standing directly out of our view, and will remain idle until we interact with the door. Once activated, they'll lean over and peek through the keyhole before backing out of the player's sight and freezing in place. And with that, we've reached the end of the Night Terrors minigames, and as such, our dive into the non-DLC levels of Help Wanted. Now, as we head into the Curse of Dreadbear's main hub, we're met with a title screen, where the DLC's logo is projected on the side of a house. We're sitting next to a campfire in the woods, and we can see Bonnie and Chica in the distance. It's hard to see much of anything here because of how dark it is, but with the lights on, we can see this area a lot easier. First and foremost, there's a massive Dreadbear leaning over the house in front of us, and moving the camera beyond this structure reveals not only is it one-sided, but you'll see that Dreadbear is missing his legs. We never see the lower half of his body on screen, so you would never know that he's missing parts. On the other side of the map, we'll find two more animatronics just kind of hanging out over here. Withered Bonnie is standing out in the open, watching TV. I'm not sure if that's what they intended, but that's what it looks like to me. Withered Chica, on the other hand, is standing in the tree line, staring in the direction of the player, which is super creepy. Both of these animatronics have idle animations, but they're not a threat to us in any way. Even if I teleport the player over to Withered Bonnie, they are completely harmless. With the lighting effects disabled, we can see that the tree stumps surrounding us have a basic grid texture applied to them. It's a bit interesting because you can see this during regular gameplay as well, simply by turning your game's brightness all the way up. Another potential oversight is this TV I found hidden beneath the map itself. Just beside the house in front of us, we'll find a copy of the same TVs that are scattered all around us, only it's not visible to the player at all. That's it for this title screen, so let's see what we can find in the main hub itself. This area is definitely on the spookier side, as it's lined with jack-o'-lanterns, twisted dead trees, and some seriously gloomy clouds. There's also a few cornfields surrounding us, which makes me feel right at home. Just behind the player, there's an abandoned truck sitting on a hill, and you may actually recognize this vehicle. In the alternate ending to the Pizza Party minigame, we can see what I believe is the same truck partially buried in the snow. Something you may have not known is that when pressing the button on the side of the level select monitor, this truck's headlights will turn purple. The barn beside us is mostly empty inside, although there is currently a frozen Dreadbear standing here, which I'll explain in a little bit. Far off in the distance, we can see a house sitting on top of a hill, and it appears to have one window that is being illuminated. We can fly over there and check it out, which reveals that its houseness was greatly exaggerated. It is simply a default grid textured model that is completely hollow inside, and with the lighting effects re-enabled, we'll see that it has an orange colored light placed within its walls. This particular asset also uses a forced perspective. As you can see, the building is not connected to the map at all, even though it appears to be sitting directly on top of the train from the player's view. Now, when loading into this main hub, there's a chance that an Easter egg will be loaded in as well. First, there's this large pirate ship that can be seen bobbing back and forth beyond this bloody lake. Upon closer inspection, this is a giant wooden cutout and is completely flat. Something I didn't realize at first is that this ship is supposed to be pulled out of sight by these massive tentacles. They're currently stored beneath the map, and when the player looks in this direction, they'll pop up and drag the ship out of bounds. Once out of view, these assets will be frozen in place, where they will stay until the map is reset. What's odd is that the sinking animation didn't trigger when I saw the ship for the first time, so it sort of just stayed there forever. Huh. Task failed successfully? There's another Easter egg that can take place here, only this time on a much smaller scale. When entering the hub, Dreadbear has the chance to spawn beneath the surface of the lake and begin walking up towards the player. He has his arms extended forward, making his walking animation oddly zombie-like. But instead of trying to eat our brain, he will simply walk past us and into the barn. He then freezes when out of sight, and will remain here until the map is reloaded, which is why we saw this model here earlier. Now apparently, a giant Dreadbear can be spawned in where the house usually sits, but I couldn't get the trigger for some reason. There's also a Vanny Easter egg that takes place here, but unfortunately, I couldn't activate that one either. That's everything I found in the hub though, so now let's dive into the first of the DLC's minigames, Plushkin Patch. This level functions just like Fun with Plush Baby from the Dark Room minigames. Our objective is to shine our flashlight on the approaching plushkins before they can jump scare us. Our battery is of limited supply, so we'll have to avoid using it for too long, or otherwise risk being caught in the dark. This minigame is surprisingly difficult, as these tiny animatronics can appear in the trees, under a wagon, and even walk directly at us. After illuminating this area, we can get a much better look at the assets surrounding the player. This minigame's difficulty makes a lot more sense when you can see how many objects are placed here to obstruct our view. There are dozens of pumpkins, trees, and hay bales placed here, and with limited flashlight battery power, it's hard to check every spot the plushkin can appear. Brightening things up further, we can take a look at this entire map from a distance, where we'll find that it's a small farm sitting atop a hilly terrain. Surrounding the perimeter of this farm are a bunch of trees, though they're not actually 3D objects. They're completely flat and textured a solid gray, and they're simply placed here to stand as a silhouette against the gloomy sky. There's a barn directly behind the player, and it's completely dark inside. Flying inside, we'll find that it's completely empty though, and it's not the last time we'll be seeing this structure. Just beyond the tractor on our left, there is this super creepy well, and I was curious if it led anywhere. Even if you were to get up close, the ground will block your view of the well's interior. Flying beneath the map though, we'll see it does in fact extend out of bounds. It just simply comes to an end, however. Now as the minigame begins, the plushkins will begin spawning in random locations. I wanted to take a closer look at them though. The plushkins are similar to regular plush babies, only they have spooky animatronic masks covering their faces. Upon closer inspection, we can see that they are in fact regular plush babies underneath, and there's a small black barrier covering their eyes. We can also see two red spheres placed inside this barrier, and from the outside, they look like glowing red pupils. Alongside the plushkin who spawn in these stationary locations, there are also these scripted running animations that take place throughout the night. You can see them running by and vanishing once out of sight, but where are they actually going? Well, as you can see, they'll weave through the pumpkins before face planting into the dirt and disappearing. They're not fully unloaded though. If we take a peek beneath this map, we'll see that the plushkin who runs through this play area will be stored out of bounds. They don't always face plant either. As we can see, this foxy plushkin will actually sink straight through the ground. Now, when viewing the plushkin's jump scare, I moved the camera around and found something pretty interesting. Directly in front of the player, there's a wall of one-sided developer text floating in the center of the level. It reads, "Number 2, prize counter white box." And at first I was a bit puzzled by this. After a bit of digging, I discovered that this text originally appears in the Fun with Plush Baby minigame. The developers most likely overlooked these assets after production and the whiteboxing phase, and they're simply left behind. What's odd is this same text is used for both Plush Baby levels, and this is likely because the original minigame was used as a base when creating this DLC version. This is not the only bit of developer text found in Help Wanted though, as another can be located in Mangle's vent repair minigame. The last two lines read, "Mangle, model pose and ceiling vent," and "Activate ceiling button to view Mangle." This leads me to believe that there was supposed to be a vent above the player where Mangle would eventually attack us from, though it appears to have been cut before the final release. Now, after completing this level, we arrive at the DLC's version of the victory screen. Just as I said, you would be seeing this barn again. Rather than a small room surrounded by curtains, the prize room now takes place inside of this rather familiar structure. Only now it's full of posters, balloons, and tons of other Halloween-themed decor. Moving the camera back, we can see that this barn actually sits on top of this large flat plane. Beyond this though, there isn't much else to see. Heading into the following minigame, Pirate's Ride, we're welcomed by none other than Captain Foxy himself. He explains that we're meant to shoot targets in order to earn points under the threat of being sent to Davy Jones's locker. As we're taken through this pirate adventure, we aim to score as many points as possible by shooting each of the colored targets presented to us. As we reach certain scores, a Helpy cutout will appear, and shooting him with our cannon gives us access to hidden areas within the ride. Each of these behind-the-scenes locations gives us more targets to hit, ultimately unlocking more hidden areas. Depending on how many points we score, we will either win and obtain our prize, or we'll be jump scared by Captain Captain Foxy. There's a lot to see in this area, so I'll explain the rest as we go. So restarting this level, we can take a good look at it while zoomed out, and we'll find that it's actually not super big. The facility where this ride takes place rests on top of a small grassy plain, and aside from this small entrance area, it's mostly barren. Back inside the attraction, we'll see that the cart we ride in is actually the same Freddy Fazbear one seen in this game's intro sequence. Only now it has a cannon mounted to it, as well as these two red lights on the back. With the lights now on, I want to fly through this map and get a good look at some things we can't typically see too well. Majority of this ride is dark, with a few ambient lights placed throughout, and the targets we shoot will be illuminated as we reach them. For starters, there is this hallway full of what looks like fireflies or wisps of some kind. And with the lighting effects disabled, we can see that they are simply solid blue spheres with a glow effect applied to them, and they'll just move up and down as we pass by. Now, as I said earlier, there are a handful of secret rooms that can be accessed by shooting the helpy cutouts as we go. Among these hidden areas are the offices, where you met with 3 sets of doors, each containing 3 targets and a chance to spawn Jacko Bonnie and Jacko Chica. These spooky animatronics will begin their assault the moment the doors are opened, and will jump scare us if we do not close them in time. After successfully closing each of the doors, we'll pass through this open hallway before returning to the regular path. When viewed from a different perspective, we can see how these fiery animatronics function out of the player's sight. So as we enter the hallway and one of the doors is opened, we'll see that the randomly chosen animatronic will simply appear at the end of the room. They walk towards the player, and if the door is closed when they reach it, they will stop and promptly unload. What I found even more interesting is the area just up ahead. Inside this length of hallway is an office with a few desks inside. On the desk in front of the window is a camera controller for the FNAF 3 minigame, just sort of clipping through the surface. I also noticed a lot of Z fighting going on in this area as well, and it's especially noticeable when we look at this clown poster at the start of the hall. Only half of it is visible most of the time, and moving the camera kinda makes it freak out, since the poster and wall are trying to occupy the same space. Another hidden area we can access is the kitchen, and I believe this is supposed to be the kitchen area from FNAF 1. As we move through this section of the map, Jacko Chica can be seen exiting this hallway, and 2 buttons must be pressed to lure her out of the hallway in front of us. As we approach this location, Chica will be frozen in her walking animation just out of the player's sight. As we move closer though, she'll be activated, where she then walks out into the hallway. We can not only get a better look at Chica here, but also this entire room as well. We never stopped during this section of the ride, so it's hard to see most of the details put into this area. There is another secret area we can access that takes us through the basement, but before we get there, we must first get swallowed up by the Kraken. Now, I was super curious about this part of the ride, and I want to know exactly how it worked. As we go down this hill, we pass through the portal inside the Kraken's mouth, where the screen goes black for a few seconds. We can also see that the entrance to the basement simply splits off from the original track and leads us to a separate area. A transition that is once again hidden by the black screen. The game then decides which track you follow, depending on whether or not the helpy cutout has been hit by the player. We'll be coming back to the basement in just a moment, but for now, I wanted to try and break this level. So I was curious what would happen if we teleported the player away from the cart before the minigame began, and it didn't exactly go as planned. Both the player and the Freddy cart are programmed to move along a set path, and when moving the player away from their intended position, we'll still follow that same predetermined pathing. Only now we're not on the rails. It's super disorienting flying through the walls and rotating around without any idea where we're going. What's most interesting about this though, is that the cannon actually moved with us. So even though we're not where the game wants us to be, we can still shoot the targets regardless. Unfortunately, I moved a bit too far away from the cart and couldn't properly aim at the targets, so I decided to tackle this minigame riding side saddle instead. Upon reaching the basement, I want to shoot these red targets to keep Bonnie and Chica at bay, and I found it was a lot easier to shoot the red targets if I moved the player directly in front of the cart. For some reason, when playing through this area without hacks, I was unable to hit the buttons due to the elevator's collider blocking my shots. So this change in positioning definitely helped that fact. And as the elevator went up, I was able to catch a glimpse of this area's assets unloading. Finally, I realized how claustrophobic this building is, so I decided to open things up a bit by destroying the entire roof. Now we can see the ride in its entirety in a single shot, including each of this level's hidden rooms. That's it for Captain Foxy's Pirate Adventure, but before we go, we can have a quick look at Captain Foxy's jump scare. It's pretty much unchanged from Foxy's original jump scare, only now he's wearing the rest of the getup. That's got to be the spookiest pirate I've ever seen. Heading into the third and final Afraid of the Dark minigame, we arrive at the Corn Maze, a massive labyrinth guarded by the world's angriest guard dog. As some of you may know, we've actually covered this level on HorrorScoped once before. We've learned plenty of new methods for breaking games since then, however, so we're going to put it under the scope once again. So to quickly recap this area, we start in the center of this huge maze with the simple objective of locating the exit and escaping. It's never that easy in a horror game though, so of course a key is required before that's possible. Within this map there are several colored gates, as well as the corresponding keys placed randomly throughout, and we'll have to locate the gate that matches our key if we wish to complete the night. Patrolling this area is the nightmarish animatronic Grim Foxy, who it feels like we can never truly evade. If spotted, he will aggressively give chase, resulting in a jump scare if he manages to catch you. It's a pretty simple level, but it's among the harder minigames in this DLC. There are dozens of turns and dead ends, making it all the more difficult to evade our fiery foe. On the outskirts of this map, we'll see that each gate has a road that leads off into the distance, where they will eventually come to an end. We'll be exploring this area further in just a bit, but first, let's take a look at Grim Foxy. So the moment we load into this map, Foxy will be placed within the maze, where they'll endlessly walk towards you. They're definitely not playing fair though, since we're never able to fully evade them. The reason for this is because Foxy can teleport depending on the player's current position, meaning no matter how far away we walk, they will always be able to catch up. This trick is used so that the player cannot create a gap large enough that Foxy is no longer a threat, and because of this, we'll never be more than a short distance from Foxy's position. A similar method is used in the game Escape the Backrooms, where the entity, Bacteria, is frequently warped just at the player's sight until we are spotted, making it rare to complete the level without ever encountering them. Even in my own game, Zardy's Maze, we used a similar mechanic for Zardy, otherwise there'd be a chance the player would never even see him. Lots of horror games do this if maps are expansive. While playing through this level, there are also scripted scares where Foxy can be seen running through our line of sight. Only, it's not the same enemy we typically see in this maze. We can actually find the model used for these encounters stored beneath the floor of this map, and it's just frozen in place. Once triggered, this model will be warped just at the player's sight, where it then runs into view. When this animation is complete, we can see that they sink straight into the floor and freeze in place. Right beside this model though is something else that's rather interesting. In the center of this level, there's a locked cellar door that we're currently unable to access. This door can only be unlocked when the player manages to collect each of the keys hidden within this level. And when this is done, the doors will be opened. Heading inside, we'll find this small basement area with a Vanny mask placed on the table in front of us. And by putting it on, we will finish the level. You can see that beneath this map, the staircase extends into the void a short ways before it comes to a stop. When the final key is collected, the basement will be loaded in just below the rest of the map. It's a small section of floor with a shoddy structure built on top, and the player is warped here the moment we hit the trigger on the stairs up above. What would happen if we tried to access this early though? Well, by destroying the cellar doors, we can actually access the stairs before any of the keys have been collected. But unfortunately, we simply slide down the stairs and get stuck on the black barrier. Our screen is also flashing with static, and there's a pretty interesting reason for that. As I'm sure you've noticed, this level is one of the few free roam levels in Help Wanted, and due to this, certain fail-safes remain necessary. In this case, whenever the player steps out of the main gameplay area, their screen will be completely covered in static. This is done so that if the player somehow manages to break out of the map or lean forward through a wall in VR, they will not be able to see anything. The barrier not only surrounds this entire map, but is also present in certain inaccessible areas within the maze. This static is not just an effect applied to our camera either, as we can actually find it stored quite a ways beneath the center of this level. Each time we step out of bounds, this small panel will be moved directly in front of the player camera, completely blocking our vision. Because this is an actual object within the map, we can circumvent this failsafe by deleting the static itself. Now we can remove the gate and freely walk around out of bounds without being blinded. Since we're no longer in the maze and outside of Foxy's navigational mesh, Foxy has no idea how he's supposed to reach us, so he just resets infinitely to his idle location. Believe it or not, we don't need hacks to accomplish this either, because our greatest defense against Foxy actually exists within the walls of this labyrinth. Throughout the level, there are several dead zones where Foxy's AI cannot properly route to the player, resulting in the same effect as leaving the map completely. By stepping into these specific places, or just straight up touching certain walls, Foxy will get confused and teleport back to the same corner, where they'll get stuck in this endless loop. This can even be achieved when Foxy is standing right in front of us, and as long as we haven't been spotted, they will be warped away. And with that, that's everything I found hidden behind the scenes in the Curse of Dreadbear's Afraid of the Dark minigames. If you weren't scared off by the Afraid of the Dark minigames, then unfortunately for you, things are about to get much, much worse. In the spooky mansion, we'll be making a mad dash through an animatronic-ridden hallway, building a chimeric, mango-inspired animatronic, and even doing some trick-or-treating. It's scarier than it sounds, trust me. We'll also be going back to the basics and playing the Halloween-themed FNAF 1 minigame, Danger Keep Out. So as we head into the spooky mansion minigames, the first we'll tackle is Hallway Crawl. Here, our goal is just as simple as reaching the other side. Only there are a few things we'll have to look out for. Throughout this hallway, there are several doors that Nightmare Bonnie and Nightmare Chica can pop out of. These animatronics can only attack you if you're standing too close when they step out, which would usually be fairly easy to avoid. After getting far enough into the hallway, Nightmare Freddy will appear behind you, forcing you to keep moving as much as you possibly can. Nightmare Foxy also appears occasionally, and you must avoid being spotted or else you will be attacked. Reaching the bedroom at the end means victory, so now let's take a closer look at this spooky hallway. So obviously with the lights on, this hallway is a little more welcoming. We can see that the distance to the end is reasonably far, but at least it's not the nightmare fuel we were just looking at. To start, we can take a look at this entire map from an aerial perspective, where we can see that the floor extends quite a ways past the door behind us. At the other end of the hallway, we can take a look at the bedroom where we finished the level, and we can see it's a faithful recreation of the FNAF 4 bedroom. This entire level is of course based on that location, so we can see a bunch of props that were previously used in the Night Terrors minigames, including the wallpaper and doors used in the hallway itself. Now, at the end of this level, there are two hallways that lead out of the player's sight and onto these large sections of flooring. These areas are completely inaccessible to the player, but they're not entirely unseen. As you can see, just beside the door to the bedroom, we'll find two walls blocking these side hallways. As we reach the end of the level, these walls beside us will be removed, allowing us to see the hallways hidden behind them. That's not the only trick used in this area either, as there's a one-sided wall placed here as well. As we approach the bedroom door, we will pass through it, creating the illusion that the hallway behind us has disappeared. You can actually just walk back through this wall and see it for yourself though, which is pretty funny. Now, I'm not sure why this is, but when loading into this map, there's a chance that it will be mirrored. The bedroom will be facing the opposite direction, and we can see that these side hallways are also mirrored. It appears that the entire map has been flipped, since we can see two lamps typically found in the hallway now floating in the same orientation just beyond the end of the level. I'm not sure why this is done, perhaps just to mix up the player's experience, but if you think you know why, let me know in the comments. While exploring this map, I also came across two doors placed out of bounds in close proximity to each other. I experimented for a bit, but was unable to uncover their purpose. Next, we can take a look beneath the hallway, where we'll find Nightmare Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy all stored next to each other in the void. They are placed down here until they are needed within the map, where they will assume their proper positions. In this shot, you can see each of them after being moved into the map, and we can now have a closer look at their animations. We can watch as Bonnie and Chica open their doors and step into the hallway, and if the player is not caught, step back out of sight once more. They will then either move away from these locations or remain here and repeat this process. Foxy's animations are a bit more interesting though. He will warp in and out of the map similar to the others, but he can also turn into this little Foxy plush. It's pretty funny how this is achieved though. So when the player gets near Foxy, there's a chance that he drops out of sight and this stuffed animal appears where he was standing. When this happens, we can see that he just compresses into the world's worst Autobot and unloads. It's hilarious watching this giant, menacing animatronic shrink into a little harmless ball. Glorious! When Nightmare Freddy appears, we'll see that he just kind of loads in at the end of the hallway and begins walking towards us. He's super creepy looking, especially when viewed with the lighting effects disabled. He has 3 Freddles attached to his model, and they just sort of scream as they get closer and closer. That's gonna be a huge nope for me. Finally, I want to explore this level's movement mechanics because it's quite different from the free roam physics used in the corn maze. Instead of being placed on a flat plane where we can move around in a full range of motion, we're only capable of moving back and forth. And it's even more limited than that. We're not technically standing on anything, as we can warp the player out of bounds, and we'll still be locked to the same exact range of motion. We can only move forwards and backwards the same distance as the hallway too. We have managed to cheat gravity though, so we've got that going for us. That's it for Hallway Crawl, so let's jump ahead to build a mangle. In this game, we have to do exactly what the name insists. Build our very own mangled animatronic. In front of the player are 4 screens, each displaying a different animatronic part. These parts will constantly change, and we have 60 seconds to collect as many of them as possible as they pass by on the conveyor belt. If the player correctly places 7 out of the 10 parts in the receptacle, a mangled animatronic performer is created, and you've successfully completed the level. Freddles will also pass by on the conveyor belt, and we must shock them to avoid being temporarily stunned. Also, Mangle is in the vent above us and gets closer with every mistake, so it's probably best not to mess up. So switching the lights on, we can see that this entire level takes place in the center of what looks like a garbage heap. There are piles of animatronic parts and metal scraps surrounding us, but not much else. Following the parts receptacle down beneath the map, we'll see that it just comes to an end and does not lead anywhere. While I was down here though, I found a button placed out of bounds just floating here. It lacks the symbols seen on the buttons used within the map, and as far as I know, it does not serve any purpose during this minigame. Back inside the map, we can have a look at the conveyor belts and see how they function off screen. So these belts constantly move throughout the night, carrying animatronic parts past the player and into the incinerators behind us. When viewed up close, you can see that each of these parts are loaded in near the end of these pipes, just barely inside the trash pile. You don't actually need hacks to view this either. The parts can be seen loading in from the player's regular position. As these parts reach the incinerator, they'll pass through the wall of flames where they then unload. The Freddles work a bit differently though, as they'll be frozen out of sight and remain here until they make their way across the conveyor belt. When jump scaring the player, we can see that a separate model is loaded in temporarily. After this animation plays out, the incinerated Freddle will then shoot across the map and back to one of the 2 starting locations. As for building the animatronic itself, we can see that each part we drop into the hole will be unloaded once out of sight. After 60 seconds have passed, our creation will be loaded in just beneath this closed vent, where it then rises into view. They just perpetually spin until the minigame ends, or we get jump scared by Mangle. And speaking of Mangle, they are currently suspended a short ways above the vent they crawl through. When an incorrect piece is chosen, they will enter the vent and get close with each subsequent mistake, eventually resulting in a jump scare. There's not much else to see here though, so let's take a look at the following minigame. Trick or treat. As we arrive at this seemingly abandoned mansion, we're presented with 6 animatronic masks that are placed next to the door. In order to beat this night, all you have to do is knock on the door and get your candy. Though, it's not as easy as it sounds. After ringing the bell, we can see several animatronics within the mansion begin to move around. After a short timer, one of these characters will open the door, and we must slip on their matching mask to avoid being jump scared. After guessing the animatronic correctly 3 times, candy will pour out the door, and the night will be completed. Moving the camera inside the mansion, we can take a look at each of the animatronics in their dormant positions. The player has not yet rung the doorbell, so they will remain here in their idle animations until we do. Heading into these back hallways, you'll see that they don't actually lead anywhere. The staircase in the center of the building doesn't lead anywhere either, it just turns to the right and comes to an end out of the player's sight. Now the mansion itself only occupies a portion of this map overall. The rest of the level is taken up by the graveyard, as well as this small wooded area. A bunch of the trees in the front of the woods have grid textures applied to them, but the rest are textured normally. What's more interesting though, are these eyes that are placed throughout. If you turn around at any point during this minigame, you can see several sets of eyes glaring at you from afar, but they aren't eyes at all. They're actually just small pieces of yellow geometry with a glow effect applied to them. As they appear and disappear, you'll see that they'll fly straight through the ground and out of bounds. With the camera moved below the map, you can see them constantly shooting out into the void, which is pretty funny. Heading back to the mansion though, we can have a look at the animatronics as they move around inside. There are several locations these characters can stand in, and we can watch from a different angle as they move between these positions. When an animatronic is chosen to stand behind the door, they will simply snap into place behind this black one-sided wall. When the door is opened, this object will be unloaded temporarily before the door closes again. Also, the masks are just moved in front of the player camera when equipped, similar to the Freddy mask in the FNAF 2 minigame. Each of the animatronics present can appear at the door, all except for Mangle. Their purpose is to block the player's view of the mansion's interior, and they must be shooed away using the corresponding mask. Throughout this minigame, they're actually hidden behind this boarded up window on the 2nd floor. You may have not known this, but when looking out this window, you can actually trigger the sound cue before they even drop down. Have a listen. Finally, while exploring this map, I found something rather interesting hidden just beneath the front porch. On the ground just beneath where the player is standing, a flashlight is hidden just out of sight. As you may recall, this is the same model used in Plush Baby's Dark Rooms minigame. In this particular case, it was clipping through the door behind the player, and its controls were tied to the player camera. This flashlight functions a bit differently though. Rather than being tied to the player camera, if the player is warped beneath the porch, we can actually pick it up directly. It will be powered down the moment we grab it, and the battery begins draining until it dies. I don't believe it can be turned off once activated, as I was unable to do so while messing around with it, but it makes you wonder why this was placed here. My hunch is that this level was originally intended to have a flashlight mechanic of some kind, and after this concept was scrapped, the developers had simply forgotten about this asset. That's it for Trick or Treat though, so let's take a quick peek at the Dreadbear minigame. In this game, the player is tasked with preparing a brain to be inserted into Dreadbear's skull. To do this, you must use a syringe to color each section of the brain to match the reference on your left. You also have to charge the brain so that the numbers on the panel line up, and then adjust his neural feedback loop to match the signal provided by this machine. The minigame is won if the player completes each task successfully before inserting his new brain. So with the lights on, we can see how this map is put together. For starters, the hallways surrounding the play area do not lead anywhere. Just out of sight, they lead into the void, which makes sense considering we would never be able to see this far. On the other side, we can see that it's the same story. There's nothing over here but a barrel and an empty coffin. Behind Dreadbear, we can see that the castle itself sits atop this flat plane. The archways that make up this building are placed atop the dirt floor, and we'll also find that there's a distinct lack of walls here as well. The player would never know it, but when playing through this minigame, they're staring off directly into the void. As for Dreadbear, we can see that the platform he's attached to is simply hovering directly above this hole. There's nothing down here though, and it leads directly out of bounds. The track that Dreadbear arrives on leads through the archways in the center of the map, and it ends just beyond the door itself. This map is actually really small, and because of this, there isn't a whole lot for us to see. With that being said, let's jump into the next set of minigames. Danger, Keep Out. After loading into Night 1, you'll find yourself in a familiar location. Well, sort of. As I said before, this is a Halloween-themed version of the original FNAF 1 minigame, and it takes place in a very similar location. The map looks a bit different though, as there's now a light button on the control panel and a breaker switch on our left. Both doors are boarded up as well, meaning we are unable to close them. For the most part, these nights play out the same. You must keep tabs on Jacko Bonnie and Jacko Chica as they attempt to reach your office, flashing them with the light before they can break down the boards and jump scare you. On Night 2, Grim Foxy will be activated, and you'll have to flash him with a light to keep him at bay. Finally, on Night 3, Dreadbear will begin his approach, only stopping momentarily when being flashed by our light. When low on power, you must cycle it off and on again, using this switch to bring it back up to 100%. Recap aside, we can have a look at this map up close and see how it has changed. There are all kinds of spooky props found throughout this level, including witch hats, broken boards, and plenty of jack-o'-lanterns. If we head into the backstage room, we'll find what I believe is the Nightmare Endo's arm placed on the floor. This object is always visible on camera 5, but because of how close it is, you'd never know that it's not attached to anything. Heading into the dining area, we'll find Bonnie and Chica standing on stage, but peeking behind Pirate's Cove, we'll see that Foxy must have called in sick today. He is not used on Night 1, so he's currently stored beneath the map and out of the player's sight. Back aside the map, we can watch as Bonnie and Chica leave the stage, and as they do, the inside of their suits will begin glowing bright orange. As expected, the security cameras will turn to static as these characters snap into their idle poses. This is in line with the other minigame, although these animatronics don't function exactly the same. When moving down the hallways towards our office, they will not stop and wait in the doorway for us to notice them. Instead, they'll begin attacking the boards relentlessly, and on the final hit, wind up for a high-powered shoulder bash. Similarly, Chica will attack 3 times before charging through the boards and triggering a jump scare. When these enemies are flashed with our light and vanish from the cameras, we'll find them stored beneath the map. Until they're moved back inside the pizzeria, they will assert dominance far below the map. While viewing this, Bonnie was also warped down here and they fused into the ultimate T-posing animatronic. Glorious! On Night 2, we can see that Foxy will be loaded in behind the curtain, and we can watch from a different angle as he steps out of Pirate's Cove. He'll open the curtain slowly with his hook and then step out completely. After this, he'll begin sprinting down the hallway, resulting in an unavoidable jump scare. Unlike the other animatronics, when Foxy is flashed by our light, they will simply reset back to their starting position instead of leaving the map. As for Night 3, we can take a look at Dreadbear as he begins leaving the stage, and it's pretty hilarious. As he steps down into the dining area, he'll start floating above the ground. Eventually, gravity kicks back in though, and he's forced back onto the floor, where he continues as usual. Dreadbear will slowly approach the player as the night goes on. eventually reaching our office. To avoid this, the player must stop Dreadbear by flashing him with the lights as frequently as possible. When this is done, Dreadbear will stop moving and fall into this dormant state temporarily. While viewing this, I noticed something a bit strange. The room on camera 5 has a one-sided wall that is facing the dining area. It's visible when viewed from the outside, and we can see what looks like wooden trim clipping through it. It's weird because the wallpaper attached to this trim does not match the rest of the map. This section of the map is hard to see through the cameras, so most people wouldn't even notice that it's here. Dreadbear can be seen walking through this impromptu doorway, but even then, it's too pixelated to make it out very much. Finally, there is a pretty interesting Easter egg that can be triggered on night 3. So typically when loading into this minigame, the phone will ring, but nobody will be on the other end. However, if the phone does not ring and the player still picks it up, a beeping sound will be heard. Shortly after, scanning for glitches will appear on the monitor, as the entire facility is covered in static. No glitches will be found, and the player is then taken back to the DLC's title screen. While this Easter egg is taking place, we can move the camera throughout the pizzeria and have a closer look. Majority of the walls and objects will be covered in a grid texture. Aside from a few assets, they'll be bright pink instead. Among the objects covered in these basic textures is Jacko Chica, who looks absolutely horrifying. Foxy and Bonnie will be completely overcome by this, losing their original texture to this terrifying bugged appearance. Dreadbear is in pretty rough shape too, with only their teeth and endoskeleton being unchanged. What's funny is that when this Easter egg begins, all the trash from our office instantly vanishes, and we can find it flying downwards below the map and into the void. I guess it doesn't count as littering if it's in the vacuum of space. And with that, that's everything I found hidden out of bounds in the Spooky Mansion and Danger Keep Out minigames. And as such, our coverage of the Curse of Dreadbear DLC. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like to help out the channel, and subscribe for future coverage on all your favorite horror games. Thanks for watching, and cheers.